Friday night should have felt ordinary. I had cooked her favorite pasta, poured the wine just right, and even lit the candles despite knowing she'd roll her eyes at the effort. But as soon as we sat down, she said it. Honestly, I feel like I'm just living with my roommate. I froze mid-bite. My fork hovered above the plate, pasta dangling like a fragile bridge between disbelief and denial. I wanted to laugh it off, convince myself she was tired, that it was some fleeting frustration. But the tone, the sharpness beneath her casual words, stung more than I could admit. I had spent years building this life with her, and suddenly it sounded as if I had only been a utility, a fixture in the background. I tried to respond with humor. Well, your roommate's a great chef. She didn't laugh. Instead, she leaned back, scrolling through her phone, eyes distant, her thumb moving with an unfamiliar detachment. That's when I noticed it, the slight smirk that didn't belong to me, but to someone else, someone invisible, someone already lodged in our world without my knowledge. I spent the next few hours replaying our past months in my head. The little changes, late nights at work, phone calls cut short, laughter I didn't recognize in the background. I'd ignored the signs because I wanted to be blind. I wanted to believe she loved me, that our marriage was still safe, that we were still a team. Friday night shattered that illusion in a single casual phrase. I stayed silent after dinner, cleaning up the dishes with robotic precision while she watched TV. Her legs tucked beneath her like she belonged somewhere else, somewhere I wasn't invited. When she finally went to bed, I sat in the living room, staring at the empty wine glasses, the faint smell of sauce, and the quiet that suddenly felt like a vacuum. Saturday morning, I woke to a note on the fridge. Not her handwriting, but a printed one. I've taken the liberty of paying the first month's rent. Moving in this morning. Keys under the mat. Alex. Alex. Of course. The person I had suspected in passing but dismissed as paranoia. She hadn't just called me a roommate. She'd rented out our home without telling me. It was a surreal, cinematic betrayal. The kind that makes you wonder if you're awake or trapped in someone else's cruel imagination. I went to the mat, lifted the keys, and felt the weight of reality pressing down. The apartment that had been our sanctuary was now a rental unit, a stage for her duplicity. I tried to confront her, voice trembling, anger clawing at the edges. Why? I asked. Her response was maddeningly calm. We're better this way. I needed space. You were too predictable. Alex is exciting. You're comfortable. But I need more than comfort. Comfort. That word echoed in my skull like a hammer. I had provided everything she asked for: security, love, laughter. And yet, it had been insufficient. I realized then that I had been living with someone who had already decided my presence was optional. I spent the day wandering through the apartment, examining traces of our shared life. Photos, mugs, books. Each item felt like a relic of a life that had ended quietly, without argument, without closure. She had already shifted into her new role, the role of tenant, treating me like a background character in the story of her new excitement. By evening, I knew I couldn't stay passive. Revenge isn't always grandiose. Sometimes it's quiet, precise, and impossibly satisfying. I called the landlord, not to evict her, not yet, but to confirm that no sublease agreement had been made in her name. I waited, holding the line as each minute stretched like an eternity. When I finally heard the landlord's voice, it was confirmation and liberation. There was no legal record of Alex's tenancy. The apartment still belonged to me. The knowledge hit me like sunlight through a storm. I could reclaim my home. I waited for her to return from a night out, leaving her phone on the counter, her jacket draped carelessly over the chair. When she opened the door and saw me sitting calmly on the sofa, keys in hand, her face froze. "This isn't funny," she said, voice sharp, but it lacked conviction. "I called the landlord," I said softly. "No lease. The apartment is mine. The keys are back where they belong." Her lips quivered, half in anger, half in disbelief. "Alex." She looked around, realizing that her planned takeover had been nothing but smoke and mirrors. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to threaten. Silence and facts carried more weight than any outburst. She left that night, dragging her bags behind her, muttering apologies that sounded rehearsed. I didn't stop her. I didn't chase her. I just watched as the door clicked shut, the echoes of betrayal slowly fading into the quiet that was finally mine again. Sitting alone in the living room, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The wound was fresh, raw, and likely permanent in some ways, but there was clarity. I had survived the weekend that had begun with my heart breaking at a single word. Roommate. I had faced the betrayal, witnessed the audacity, and reclaimed my own space, literally and emotionally. I realized then that revenge isn't always about hurting the other person. Sometimes it's about reclaiming your dignity, your life, your narrative. She had tried to reduce me to a background character, to treat our shared life as a leasable commodity. I had turned that attempt into proof of my own strength. As I poured a fresh glass of wine and sat by the window, I let the silence envelop me. No laughter from another room. No whispers, no smirk that belonged to someone else. Just me alone but unbroken. And for the first time since Friday I felt free.